Thanks, Don. Is everybody ready? Okay. I wanted to start off firstly by thanking Ed for relieving this slot. For the last 5 or 6 years, Ed has done the November demo on a Christmas ornament. So he stepped down and gave me the opportunity. Thank you, Ed. This is basically the same demonstration that I'm going to be given at the Florida Woodturning Symposium. So if you go to the symposium, you won't hurt my feelings if you skip this demo. If you've watched it tonight, go and see somebody else. I'm going to show you how I make these little birdhouse ornaments. And I'm actually going to turn 2 of them tonight. And the reason is that when I make them in batches of 100. Let me step back for a minute. It sounds like that's all I do with my life. I'm on my 3rd batch of 100. So I treat it as a production process, and I wanted to share some tips that I picked up in producing a bunch of these. So let me pass this around. The first thing with the production of them is I break it down into different operations. I break the whole process down into about 9 or 10 different operations. And within each operation, I don't need to change a chuck or move a tool rest. The reason why I do that is just in terms of efficiency. And I'll give you an example. If you're going to drill a hole on the lathe, it's probably going to take you about 10 minutes to get your piece mounted in a chuck, find your drill bit, get your drill chuck in, and then the actual drilling of the hole is probably going to take you about a minute. And there's a huge part of wood turning and woodworking that involves is setup time. And that setup time is the 10 minutes to getting your stuff together. If you're just drilling one hole, that hole is taking you 11 minutes, assuming that it... Yeah, tell them I can't hear what it is. So if you're doing it 10 times, then even though each hole takes you 10 minutes, if you're drilling 10 holes, then that setup time of 10 minutes is kind of amortized over each hole. So in reality, each hole is only taking you 2 minutes each. So it's a huge way to save time. So the first part of the process is to get your wood blanks together. I generally turn these out of domestic wood. In fact, most of them have been turned out of wood that I've gotten from the wood at the meetings here. Today I'm going to be using cherry and sycamore. And the little perch is going to be made out of wenge, which is obviously not a domestic wood. It's left over from a kitchen that I made last year. I cut the blanks for the roofs to 2 5/8 by 2 5/8. The roof is going to be turned to 2.5 inches diameter, so that extra 1/8 gives me a little bit of wiggle room. And then the bodies are 2 1/8 by 2 1/8 by 2.5 inches. Again, a little bit of wiggle room on the diameter. I generally look for wood without any defects. On the roof blanks, you can get away with some defects because a huge amount of this wood is turned away. So a knot or something like that, if you plan it carefully, you can actually end up turning it away. But on the body, for example, any defect, it's such a small project that any defect is really going to show up. It's not like a knot on a bowl, for example. A knot in here would actually take up most of the space. So I try and, for the most part, find defect-free wood. And I also tend towards lighter colored woods. These are going to go on a Christmas tree, and a lighter colored wood like maple or sycamore is going to show up better on a Christmas tree than some of the darker woods. Having said that, I do like to use walnut when I can get hold of it. But if I do use walnut, I'll use it, say, for example, on the roof, and then turn the body out of a lighter wood like maple or sycamore. Okay, so... I don't worry too much about the moisture content. That's not to say that I make an ornament out of a piece of wood that was a tree yesterday. I gather these during the course of the year, and I have a bunch of milk crates. And once I've cut the blanks out, I just throw it haphazardly into that milk crate. It's got air vents, and so it'll dry. By the time I get to it, it's probably dry because it's a small piece of wood. And then certainly, because I'm turning 100 at a time and I'm working my way through the process, by the time I'm getting it to a point where the dimensions start to become critical or I need it for finishing, chances are that there's been so much of the wood removed and it's a small piece that it's dry enough. So I don't, like I said, I don't concern myself too much with the moisture content. I know that it's going to take care of itself during the process. On the productivity point of view, one thing that I found that was hugely helpful was I made myself a gauge. Do you want to put this on the overhead? This gauge has got every single measurement that I need for this project. The tenons, the diameter of the body blank, the diameter of the roof blanks, the diameter of the perch, how deep I'm going to hollow. I use this blank throughout the process. I use this gauge throughout the process. I don't have to worry about setting any calipers or finding calipers or having different calipers with different measurements. Everything is all included in this gauge here. And that really made a huge difference in terms of productivity. So a few things about the equipment. Whenever I'm spindle turning, I always use a stab center. For those not familiar with it, that has this little pin in here so that when I get a catch, the blank will stop and won't be a whole lot of damage to the blank. I will generally mount the stab center directly into my chuck as opposed to putting the stab center into the headstock, because normally the next thing I do after turning between centers is mount the piece in the chuck. So here I've already got my chuck mounted on the lathe. I use a cone center on the tailstock, and then the tool rest that I use has got a fairly low profile. And that's really nice when you're turning some small pieces because you're able to reach underneath with your fingers and support the piece. And also too, I'm trying not to move the tool rest during the whole process, so when I'm sanding, it's also nice to be able to reach underneath here and sand. This particular one is made by Robust, and I like it a lot. I'm sure there's others, but with spindle turning, you want to look for something that's got a low profile. It's not very deep. And then something I do a lot on a regular basis is I take a file and I file this so that there's no nicks, so my tool can traverse across the tool rest nice and smoothly. So I'm going to start off with the body blanks. And this is the first operation. So while I'm waiting on that, let me talk a little bit about the finish. When I first started making these, the first batch of 100 that I did, I finished it with lacquer. There's a lot of great things about lacquer. Saving time is not one of them. It took hours and hours and hours. The obvious advantage of finishing with lacquer is that I can get a gloss finish, which for a Christmas tree decoration is obviously an advantage. Just from terms of trying to cut down on the time that I spend on these, I've started finishing them with a product called Rubio Monocoat. It's an oil-based finish. It's used on floors, so I assume it's pretty durable. And as it says in the name is Monocoat. Hang on. So it literally just takes one coat of oil. It's the downside of it is that it's not a gloss finish. It's a matte finish, but it is very easy to apply. I don't apply it according to their instructions. Their instructions called for you to sand to 100 grit, which is very, very low, even by my standards. 100, yeah, 100 to 120 is what they say in the instructions. I sand to 320. The other thing about it is it's a two-part mixture. It comes with another little can, which I don't have here, which is an activator. I don't use that. If I'm doing flat work, then I'll mix it if I'm doing a lot. But for a process like this, I just apply straight the part A. It will cure. It just cures slower. Instead of curing in a couple of days, it's going to cure in a week or so, which for my purposes with this is not a problem. And then the final thing about it is that it's not cheap. If you had a look on the link that I provided on that the demonstration notes, you'll see that this is selling on Amazon for $53. It does go a long way though. And so if you are going to try it, don't get a can bigger than this. Because the other thing is that if you don't use it up really quickly, I've had this for about 6 or 8 months. I'm nearly done with it, but it's a lot more of a gel now than what it was. But it does go a long, long way, but there's definitely sticker shock when you first buy it. Sorry? Yeah, I haven't used that before. I'm not familiar with that. Did someone? That's the Rubio Monocoat, yeah. Yeah, that was a piece I just turned yesterday, so it's not fully cured yet. Okay, I think we're good to go now. Much better. So the first thing I'm going to do is rough out all the pieces. I'll start off and I'll rough turn the body blanks, and then that will be one operation, and the next operation will be to rough turn the roof blanks. And this is a tenon that I'm going to turn so that I can hold this piece in my chuck. Just a note about those tenons that I'm turning, particularly to the people in the audience that are fairly new to wood turning. Those are not perfect tenons. Those are tenons that are good enough given the size of the piece and what I know I'm going to be doing and where I feel with my tool control. If I was doing a larger piece of a bowl or something like that, I would definitely take a lot more care and attention with that tenon, make sure the angle matches my dovetail jaws, my shoulders are nice and square and stuff. So just keep that in mind. When I was doing this, and in the notes, you'll actually see that I talk about turning that to a taper to start the roof. I've actually found out that I can actually do this a little bit quicker in the next step by turning that differently. I'll show you that in the next step. When I'm in my workshop, I bring my tractor and I put the dumpster over here. Sorry. Full speed ahead. We're going to turn the roofs first. And for this, I'm going to need my drill chuck and a 1 3/8 Forstner bit. I'm going to drill a hole about 1/8 of an inch deep, and I just used the little stagger on the front of the drill bit to determine that. The design for these birdhouses I originally found on the internet. I think it was a guy by the name of Eugene Schulk from Canada, and I adapted the size of everything to the equipment that I had, so that I didn't have to go out and buy any more different chuck jaws or something like that. The proportions work pretty good, so I'm sticking with that. So the first thing I need to do is just true up this edge. Whenever I'm drilling on the lathe, I'll always put a little dimple there just to start the bit so that it doesn't wander off center. And this is going to be the mortise that the tenon on the birdhouse body is going to fit into. So, okay. Let me get my sandpaper. I'm just going to sand this underside because I'm not really going to be able to get to that later. Generally, when I'm drilling on the lathe, I'll try and keep the speed around about 500-600 RPM. These are the yes, they are the coat. Yeah. They're great bits. I got them from Craft Supply many years ago. They really work great. One other thing about drill bits and router bits is to keep them clean. I'm constantly in my workshop, I'm constantly cleaning the drill bits, router bits, table saw blades that I use. It's amazing how much sharper they will be. They get pith built on them from the residues in the wood. And I just clean them off. I get that orange stuff from Home Depot, and I keep it in a Tupperware in the workshop and throw it in there to soak for 5-10 minutes, and take an old toothbrush, scrub it. Whenever I've used a bit for a reasonable length of time, I'll clean it. So now we can make this. I need to take this chuck off. And switch out jaws. And I'm mounting this in expansion mode. I've got plenty of meat over here, so it's not a concern. Let me just take this out as well. Come down with this. So the first thing I need to do is get rid of a lot of wood. And I use a skew for that, and I do a peeling cut. So I'm going to present the skew. If you're looking at the wood from this angle here, it's at about 11 o'clock. And as the diameter of the blank reduces, I need to lift the handle up in order to keep it on that position, and also to slide the skew forward a little bit as well. It's a pretty efficient way of removing wood. And I'm going to do just a tiny little hole in there. That's going to be the guide hole for the eye hook that we put in the roof. Now I'm going to just do a couple of steps. You can see the shape of the roof starting to come together. I'll just true this up. I'm going to put a little bevel over here on this side. It's just a spindle gouge. Start shaping the top of the roof. Whenever you're working on spindle work like this, where it's supported in a chuck, you always want to start at the far end while you've still got mass of the wood. The rest of the roof I'm going to shape with a bowl gouge, a small 1/2-inch bowl gouge. As I'm getting to this point, I've got to be aware that there's a hole there, that mortise there. If I come in too sharply, there's a chance that I might hit it. Blend those two curves together. I used to have a lot of problems at that point right there, where I would burnish the wood and bruise it, and it was very, very difficult to sand that out, if not impossible. In fact, very often I take a chatter tool and just hide that with a chatter tool. I eventually figured out that it was the heel of the bowl gouge that was doing it as I turned that corner. And so I ground a secondary bevel on the bowl gouge so that the heel is not hitting that point as I turn that corner. When I'm done with this, I'll pass the bowl gouge around so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. For the purpose of the demo today, I'm just going to stand with 180. Normally I would go up to 320. I always sand with the grain, especially on the lower grit of 180, to get rid of any radial scratches. And then the last thing I need to do here is put the little eye hook in. I drill this with a drill pin vise, I think it's called. I got this idea from one of Ashley Harwood's videos, DVDs. I think it's the one where she does her sea urchins. Oh. Trick is to open up the pliers just at the right time. And now we can just go through that process again. That's not running very true, is it? It's amazing how you get used to your own lathe. A little bit better. For those in the front, I'll start this at a slightly lower speed. Whenever I'm working with the bowl gouge or the spindle gouge here, what's the very important part of the cut is the entry cut. Always enter with the flutes straight up and down. If your flutes are open a little bit, the gouge is going to kick off to that side. If they're closed too much, it'll kick off to that side. So it's now you don't. As soon as you've now got a lip for the bevel to ride on, you can rotate the tool to a cutting position. But it's very important when you first start to orientate it with the flute straight up and down. You'll also notice that I'm not turning with my hands or my arms. I'm turning with my body. I have the gouge tucked in here, and it's a whole body movement as I'm turning. I lost my piece of sandpaper. This foam back sandpaper is really nice. It comes in squares that are 4 times as big as this. I cut it in quarters, and I just write 1, 2, 3. 1 is for 180, 2 is for 240, 220, 3 is for 320. And turn the lathe speed down a little bit. And except for the finishing, that's the roof's done. And we'll now move on to the bodies. And again, this involves another setup. I literally would do it 100 times. What you've just watched me do twice, I would do that 100 times and do that whole thing there. Not all on the same day. I'll turn for an hour or two. So it'll take me a couple of days to work my way through it, but the lathe will stay set up exactly as it is until the next operation. I sell them on my Etsy site, where I give them away as gifts. To be honest, most of what I do, why I do this, is practice my tool control. It's a small, simple project. I get pretty quick feedback on how I'm doing, and that's one of my driving factors for this is to practice my tool control, in particular with the skew chisel. No, I've still got a long way to go. Lost the blanks there. For those of you that are just starting to purchase stuff, buy a couple of chucks. I have 3 chucks this size, with 3 different jaws on them, and I never have to mess with changing jaws. It's one of those things that it hurts like really bad when you do it, but you'll thank yourself later. When I first started and I was just operating with 1 chuck, I spent most of my time in the workshop changing jaws. And once you can get to a point where you have a couple of different chucks, stick to 1 brand so that everything's interchangeable. It's really worth doing. Yeah, I do like the Vic Mark ones a lot. So first thing I need to do is true this up. And now I'm going to hollow out the body, and this is from all those years that I mentioned where Ed was showing us how to make Christmas ornaments. This is one of the tricks that he showed us. I use a router bit for hollowing out the body. It's a core box router bit. It's a 1 1/8 inch core box router bit. I get it from MLCS. I get a lot of my router bits from them. The disadvantage of it is that I'm not going to end up with even walls, which can be an issue on an ornament like this where you want to try and minimize the weight. In this one, it doesn't turn out to be a problem. The advantage of this is that it's really simple, it's very easy, it doesn't take any skill, it's quick, and it's repeatable. You get the same result every single time. I hollow to a depth of 2 inches, and so what I do is on my gauge here, I've got that 2 inch mark there, so I bring that and I line that up with the front of my drill chuck so that I know that I'm going to hollow in there until this touches. And before I do that, I'm going to turn a little tenon there. The tenon will be 1 3/8 inches, and that's what will fit into the roof. I'm only making this tenon 1/8 of an inch deep, slightly less than 1/8 of an inch deep, and I'm not going to turn it to the right size now. I'm going to turn it slightly oversized, because when I hollow, there's going to be stresses relieved in the wood, and it might change shape. I'll do the final tuning of that fit once I've done the hollowing. Forgot to turn the lathe down a little bit. You want to do this in a number of different passes. If the bit is getting hot enough where you can't touch it, then you're probably drilling a little too aggressively. Your bit's not going to last very long, and it's also going to affect the wood negatively. It's got the round bottom, the curve at the bottom, and then when I flip this around and turn the outside, I'm going to turn around over there. So I got a little out of sequence, as you tend to do when you're doing a demonstration in front of people. Before I started all of that process, what I should have done was have a look here and choose the prettiest part of the wood. That's going to be the front of the birdhouse. So I'm going to put that over here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is mark out 3 marks here. This one indicates how deep I've hollowed. This one is going to be is where the perch is going to line up, and this is going to be the entryway to the thing. And why I got out of sequence, why I would normally do that first, is where I drilled, when I drill out with the router core bit, it's going to clean up that hole there. So normally I would drill these holes first and then do my hollowing in order to clean that up. We'll do that on the next blank. That's an 1/8" hole. In my workshop, when I'm doing this, I'll have 2 drills there, one loaded with each drill bit. I can still clean up this hole on the outside when I shape the outside, but obviously on the inside it's not going to get cleaned up. And now I'm going to rough turn the outside of the blank. Just the top half. And now I'm going to turn this to the right size to accept that mortise on the roof. One of these drilled out way better than the other. I struggled getting a perfect tenon a lot, and I came to realize that the reason why I always end up overshooting is impatience. It's not the actual messing with the parting tool, getting it to the right size. I found it's waiting for the lathe to come to a stop so that I can do something again. And my solution was to turn my tenon at a slow speed. So now I don't have to wait very long to come to a stop. So I don't get so I don't mess up because of impatience. The other thing too is you want to set your tool rest wherever possible. This isn't always possible, but so that you can bring the piece up, the mating piece up, without having to move your tool rest. Because if you're having to move your tool rest each time you're sizing that, you're going to get impatient again. And I actually have got, it's a little bit big. So that's not a perfect fitted tenon. Ideally, I should be able to turn the lathe on. If I can feel confident enough to turn the lathe up to full speed, that's probably too tight. But if I can run the lathe confidently without worrying that it's going to come off, that's a good fit. On this, because I'm using CA glue, thick CA glue, it's gap filling, and this is not really, we don't need a whole lot of structural integrity on a project like this. That'll be fine. Oh, wow. Now we'll get things in the right sequence. First thing I do is have a look, choose a pretty side, mark it. Yep. Okay, let's go. Try to get this one so that I actually have to size the tenon this time. I was on it, but thank you for the reminder. Don't drill that hole too deep. You don't want to come out the other side. No, actually, I've done some stupid things, but that's not one of them. What I should have done, let's retract this. Again, that doesn't happen very often. Okay, so that's the top half of the body is turned. Now I can just rotate this. Um, that tenon now serves to hold the piece. Don't tighten it too much. It's a pretty small tenon. There's no shoulder. There's no shoulder on the inside, so you wouldn't be able to do that. No, you could do it, but it would be kind of fiddly to get it to run true. One thing that I've also done, just in terms of efficiency, is when I first started making these, I made like a little icicle thing on the bottom here. And I came to the conclusion that aesthetics is obviously very subjective, but it just wasn't worth the extra time that it took. And it wasn't so much the turning, it was the extra sanding. And so now I just simply round this over. This is going to hang. Having said that, sometimes I do put an icicle on if I end up hollowing through the bottom here. It's not the end of the world, and you can just drill that out and add a separate icicle. Oops, that's a tenon, huh? One other thing that I've found too, like I'll do a batch of 100, and there's fatalities along the way. I'll typically end up with about 95 or 96. So I'm going to cut this off about 1/8 of an inch past that last line where I've hollowed it down to. I don't use the peeling cut to completely remove the part, because I find sometimes I end up with a dimple of tear out that's really difficult to sand out. So I'll actually cut that out. And if anything, I'd rather leave a little bump that's a whole lot easier to sand off. watching somebody use a skew in a demo, it's a little bit like watching NASCAR. You don't want anybody to crash, but if anything happens, you sure want to be able to see it. It's let me just. Not the prettiest looking body I've turned, but we'll go with it for the demo purposes. Oh, that crash. Thank you. I think we can redeem this. That's a classic skew catch right there. The last thing in terms of turning that I need to do is turn the perches. When I first started making these, I went and bought a bunch of dowel from Home Depot, and that's what I would use. Because quite frankly, the thought of turning that little perch was pretty intimidating. Finally, I decided to give it a shot, and I found out that it was really easy. Very, very simple, and probably the quickest part of the whole process. I use these long nose pin jaws. Those are the pin jaws, I'm sorry, that's the long nose jaws. And I prepare my blank 3/8 by 3/8. I'm going to rough turn this down to 1/4 inch. Because this is hollow, I'll often make them 12 inches long, and so I'll just stick out a little bit. And when I've got my tape measure, I stick out about 1.5 inches. One measurement I don't have on my gouge. And then I'll bring the tool rest up. And what I'll do, bear in mind, I'll do like 100 of these at a time. So then I'll just take some blue tape and put it on the tool rest. That way I know when I'm doing the next one, that's as far out as I have to pull it without measuring. Then I mark I forget what the measurement is, but it's that much. I think it's 3/4 of an inch. And that's going to be the section of the perch that the little bird is going to sit on. Oh, too far. Now, you all know I should have turned the lathe off to do that, huh? The next thing I need to do is turn an 1/8 inch tenon to fit in this hole. I don't bother with that. I just turn a taper down to about 1/16 of an inch. Somewhere along there is an 1/8 inch diameter, and that's when it's going to slot in. When you're sanding these, you want to support it with your finger, because there's really not a whole lot of wood. With this, with the perch, it's really crucial that you get some defect-free, straight grain wood. There's not much room here to tolerate any things. And I will use the Rubio Monocoat. I'll add this. And I'm one of those people that don't use my skew to open up these. And then you also want to grab hold of it when you part it off, because it's very easy to lose that in the shavings. And then just a quick test fit. So let me turn one more quickly. Actually, I won't bother turning another one because we're probably obviously not going to put anything on here. But what I do want to do is just finish off the others, and then I'll talk my way through the assembly process. Sorry. Oh, I see. So the pin drops in there. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. With the Rubio Monocoat, you apply it, and then you wipe it off. And they say in instructions that you cannot wipe off enough. So I apply it with the lathe turned off. I find with oil finishes, there always seems to be one little piece of wood that just does not want to accept the finish. And with the lathe not turning, I can see that and I can focus my attention there. And then I turn the lathe on and wipe it off. Those new to turning, don't use a rag for this. Use a paper towel. The danger of using a rag is that if it gets wrapped around this piece, you will follow it shortly thereafter. So use a paper towel, so if it does get wrapped around, it'll just tear off. And then what you're supposed to do is let this sit for 15 minutes and then buff it. So I'll typically apply it to about 15 or 20 of the pieces set aside, and by that time 15 minutes has passed, and then I put them back on the lathe. When I'm doing flat work, I'll buff it with the woven abrasive on my random orbital sander. You would probably be okay using that, but you might be taking a chance with it catching on something. I've found that just using a paper towel to buff it is fine. John, you've used the Rubio on a couple of projects. What are your impressions of it? They tell you the wrong proportions. I think it's like, they say mix it 3 to 1, and then they give you 15 milliliters of one and 75 of the other. And if you do the math, it doesn't work. I just mix. I typically mix it 4 to 1 when I mix it. One of the nice things about it that I like, especially after you've buffed it with the abrasive thing, is that it's got a very luxurious, silky feel to it. So on the assembly, I will apply CA glue here, and then I'll glue that in there. My workbench is one of those Festool. It's not made by Festool, it's my homemade one, but a Festool type one with all the holes in it. You've probably seen them out there on the workshop floor. So while that's drying, I'll just pop them in upside down on the workbench and fill up all the holes like that. I'd put a little bit of activator on this side and then let that dry. And then I'll come around and put a drop of CA glue here and put some activator on this. and put it on. I find with the CA glue, you want to be very careful about which part you apply the glue to, so that it doesn't spill out where you don't want it to. And so that's the sequence. So I apply it to this mortise. Generally, I apply it to the mortise so that when you're inserting the tenon, you're pushing it further in as opposed to squishing it out. And then the last thing is I apply a drop of glue, CA glue to the perch. I spritz the bottom of the little bird with activator, and I stick him in, and you have to hold him there for a little while. I say that's the last thing, but I also put a piece of twine in here. The birds, they're really difficult to find because they're called mushroom birds. And until you know, just type into Google mushroom birds, you can't find them. I don't know why they're called mushroom birds. I think they're used a lot in wedding decorations, decorating on tables and cakes and stuff like that. But if you're going to search for them, search for mushroom birds. It's still difficult to find ones that are the right size. This is not a very big project, so you need a bird that's about an inch and a half, and a lot of them are bigger. And it's impossible to find a cardinal, a small cardinal, and everybody asks for a cardinal. I found cardinals, but they're like that size, and you'd have to have a birdhouse like that size for them to look proportional. So I've settled on the little white doves. I buy those, and that's a compromise. If anybody manages to find a small cardinal, please let me know where you get them from. I have looked at craft supplies and I haven't seen them. I get them from a place called Factory Direct Outlet. And there's a lot of craft supplies there. That's also where I got these little eye hooks from. Also be careful to have a close look at the picture, because some of them are just made out of foam, and some of them are made out of foam and feathers. And the ones made out of feathers are a lot nicer. The ones that are made out of foam are just little blobs, colored blobs. They don't look very appealing at all. Sorry? No. And you'll be surprised, no matter how much time and attention you put into turning this, they fall in love with the bird. It's the bird. Oh, he's so cute. Oh, look at that little guy. It's the bird that everybody's looking at. Not your craftsmanship. It's very depressing. Okay. Yeah. Mhm. And are they feather and are cardinals? Okay. I've bought cardinals, and I've got like 20 of them, and they're that size. Yeah. But everybody does ask for cardinals. Right. Yeah. A lot of them too will come with clips that you got to pull out, because I guess you use like a little. You call it an alligator clip. I call it a crocodile clip. That you got to pull out before you to glue it on there. Does anybody have any questions? How did I make it? This I cut it on my CNC. Sorry. You could easily make it out of with the right size Forstner bits, out of plywood, and just drill the appropriate hole and then cut it in half. Line it up carefully, drill 3 holes and then line it up and cut it in half. A plywood one's not going to be as durable, but it would probably be more than sufficient. I would imagine that the fiberboard, hardyboard, yeah. And there you've got to be careful, because if you push it on too much, you end up doing the branding thing. Yeah. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much.